What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Christ in Capital, the show that wants to encourage you to love God, love neighbor, and build something. I'm the host, Dustin Johnson, and today is going to be a fantastic episode. If I don't say so myself, it's going to might be a little depressing, but Nathan's here, so
Hello.
everything's going to go hunky dorily. Yeah, we'll say hunky dorily.
Hunky dorily.
So Nathan, how have you been? It's been a while since we've recorded.
It's been a while. I've been good. Wrapping up the school year, starting the summer.
Cool.
Professor life. Hashtag professor life.
That's right. That's right. I just got off of paternity leave and started a new job, so I feel like I'm just getting off of my summer. Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know, because keeping up with kids, two under two, that's a job in and of itself. So
That's right. You pretty much have given up the right to have a vacation
it's true.
until many years from now.
It's true. It's very true. Unless the grandparents want to keep the kids and we go do our own thing. I was watching a commercial the other day. It was a Virgin Mobile. The Branson. What's his name? Branson's Richard Branson. Is that his name? Anyways, there's a cruise line. And the commercial it starts out with these kids singing about how their parents left them. This like operatic kind of, tune. And they're like, Mom and Dad left us. They went and left us at home and we're sad and all that stuff. And it's a advertisement for a cruise line that's just adults.
Nice.
I thought it was funny. But anyways, so thanks everyone for joining. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to remind everyone to go and like and subscribe to the podcast, the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast feed, get the episodes, share them. It really helps us climb the ladder. Also, go to goodfightoutfitters.com. We got some new designs out right now. Really cool. For those who don't know, Good Fight Outfitters is a brand that's focused on highlighting the Christian life as a battle, as warfare. We need to have a sense for the grittiness of the Christian life. And a lot of the Christian clothing lines out there are all about inspiration and salvation and all that stuff, which are great things. But we need to balance ourselves out a little bit. So hopefully these designs, these clothes will help you maybe stick your chest out a little bit, walk with a little bit of confidence. I got one on here. If you can, everyone can see it.
Worship is warfare.
Yep. So go check it out. This is one of the new designs. So yeah, go do it. And then share a post on social media and tag us. All right, Nathan, we're talking about abortion today.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a big topic. So we're going to be talking about abortion, but there's actually a lot of things going on in the news right now, right? We have monkeypox going on. We have inflation. We have Elon versus Twitter. We have the disinformation board has been disbanded. Did you hear about that?
I did not hear about that. Tell me about that.
Well, you heard about the disinformation board, right?
President Biden.
Yeah. Well, now it's canceled.
That didn't last very long.
Yeah, the person they put in front of it was caught dispersing disinformation. So
you can't write this stuff. You really can't.
You can't. We also have gas prices, potential food shortages in the future. Really, kind of worrying things. Nancy Pelosi is not going to be receiving communion from her church because of her stance on abortion. So there's lots of things. Did I miss anything? Is there anything big in the news that you could think of?
Those are the main things on my mind right now.
But I think that the Roe versus Wade leak is probably one of the bigger ones.
Yes.
Because it hasn't been released yet officially, the opinion. And it was just a draft opinion. But everyone's up in arms. Pro-choice versus pro-lifers. I don't know what the split is. If it's 50-50 across the nation, the two different sides. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But to kind of get us into the discussion, I wanted to read a little excerpt from Alito's opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. It was Alito that wrote it, I think. I think it was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And here's just two little excerpts from it to get us into the discussion. So he writes, we hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision, including the one on which the defenders of Roe versus Casey, or Roe and Casey now chiefly rely, the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. That provision has been held to guarantee some rights that are not mentioned in the Constitution, but any such right must be deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition, and quote, implicit in the concept of ordered liberty, end quote. He goes on to say, Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. And far from bringing about a national settlement of the abortion issue, Roe and Casey have inflamed debate and deepened division. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. The permissibility of abortion and the limitations upon it are to be resolved like most important questions in our democracy by citizens trying to persuade one another and then voting. That is the Constitution. What does it say? That is what the Constitution and the rule of law demand. So it was a long opinion, or a long kind of write-up. Those are just two short little excerpts. What do you think, Nathan? Yeah, what do you think about the opinion and the leak?
Okay, so the opinion, I'll say that I haven't read the whole thing. It's very long. I've read bits and pieces and heard a lot of people talk about it. And from what I can tell, it's very much what I think a lot of us pro-lifers wanted to be written.
Yep.
Not only is it well-reasoned, I mean, the fact that Roe and Casey have been, on the books for so many decades, it's given people, legal scholars, plenty of time to pick through it piece by piece and find all the flaws and construct the argument. So nothing that Alito says in there is a surprise to anyone who's been, critiquing these things for a long time. But not only is it great from a legal perspective, but it's also great from a rhetorical perspective, because he really takes to task these things. And some people criticize it for his tone, but I think it needs to be a little bit passionate. I think it needs to show the ridiculousness of Roe and Casey, particularly because one of the main liberal arguments is simply stare decisis, that, well, it's already on the books, so we shouldn't change it. That's precedent. And I think one of the things that Alito does is show that if the precedent is this bad, this poorly reasoned, this historically inaccurate, this dumb, then we can throw precedent out the window. So I really like that.
I think Ginsburg even said that, right? Or at least she had the same kind of opinion about the argument for Roe. Like she saw it was poorly reasoned, I think, which says something.
Yeah.
I think,
as far as the what I think about the leak.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard
version of government.
Yeah, I've heard compelling arguments that it could either have been kind of a conservative person, like a law clerk, or a progressive person. There actually could be reasons for either side to have leaked this. It could be a conservative who found out that one of the justices was flaking, and because of internal pressure, and actually wasn't going to support the decision like they had planned. So you leak it out into the public, and that puts pressure on that justice to stick with it. Or the reverse is the case. You leak it to the public, create such a public outcry, create so much more public pressure than there would have been, that it forces one of the conservative justices to flip their opinion, which is actually kind of what happened with Casey, if I'm not mistaken. That not that it was leaked, but that there was a last minute flip. Kennedy what was going to not support Casey, and then last minute he changed his opinion, probably because of pressure.
Okay.
Um,
You would think that if you're going to be a Supreme Court justice, you would have to have, I mean, there would be some vetting of principles. Like you have to be someone with guts and, you know, resolve to be a justice. But yeah, I think, you know, leaking this is definitely a strike at government. You know, the functioning of our governmental powers of the three branches. It's definitely a very bad thing. Might even use the word insurrection, maybe. I don't know. I'll stew on that.
some people have claimed that it's treasonous.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree that this doesn't do the court any favors.
Yeah. No.
And it just further politicizes things. You don't want public opinion having any part of interpreting the Constitution.
Yeah. It. Yeah. Let's. I think this is a good segue. I want to pull up this video that you and I, that I plugged into our show notes. And it shows kind of how some of these discussions have been going on for months, right? Maybe even years within the court itself. Like they've been having deliberations back and forth. This video was from, I think, 2013, or I'm sorry, December of 2021. So yeah, let's take a look at this. And I want to see what you have to say, Nathan, because I have some questions too that I want to talk about.
Viability is not tethered to anything in the Constitution, in history, or tradition. It's a quintessentially legislative line.
Counsel, there's so much that's not in the Constitution, including the fact that we have the last word. Marbury versus Madison. There is not anything in the Constitution that says that the Supreme Court, is the last word on what the Constitution means. It's totally novel at that time. And yet, what the court did was reason from the structure of the Constitution that that's what was intended. And here in Casey and in Roe, the court said there is inherent in our structure that there are certain personal decisions that belong to individuals and the states can't intrude on them.
The viability line.
Okay. So, question, Nathan.
Mm-hmm.
Sotomayor is saying that in the same way that we have judicial review, we reasoned from the Constitution that we have the power of judicial review. In that same way, we're also reasoning from the Constitution that women have certain rights that cannot be infringed upon by government. Is that a legit comparison? I mean, it seems like okay. I don't know. What are your thoughts on judicial review?
Oh
yes?
my, wow. Well, I will say this. I think it's a total bait and switch non sequitur to say, well, because we were able to establish judicial review, which technically, isn't in the Constitution, although it's implied just by the fact that you have a Supreme Court. That has no bearing on whether or not the Supreme Court can then reason from the Constitution that you can do anything, whether that's kill a baby or, whatever. Now, the judicial review, it's a fascinating case, the Marbury versus Madison. Have we talked about it on this show?
I don't think so.
It's, we could spend all day talking about it, but maybe we'll do another episode. I would love to tell the story. It's a great story, but essentially here's the problem. The Constitution just says you shall have a Supreme Court.
Okay.
So it goes on like a long, list of the president and his duties, and the Congress and their duties, and then it's like, you should have a Supreme Court. Doesn't tell you how many justices. It doesn't tell you exactly what they're supposed to do. So then this issue comes up between Jefferson and Adams, and that we won't get into, but they appeal to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually refuses to rule on the issue. But by doing so, the reasoning is that's not our job. What our job is to do is to interpret the Constitution and then apply that. And that is what established judicial review. And that makes sense that that's how they extrapolated from the Constitution what their role is. Because, well, the Constitution is the highest law in the land. Supreme Court's the highest court in the land. Therefore, what's their job? To compare state laws or actions on lower levels to the law of the land and make decisions one way or another. But that has no bearing whatsoever on whether or not you can say, well, because, while this right is not guaranteed in the Constitution, the Supreme Court can reason from the Constitution whatever they want.
It's almost like you're getting back to that discussion we had last week about deconstruction, or last time, where you can make it say whatever you want it to say. I mean, like, you don't want the court to be able to do that, right? That's not a good thing. I thought that was interesting. I'd never thought about that in relation to the whole Roe versus Wade thing. That the justices are thinking that we have certain things that we can kind of extrapolate from the Constitution. That just seems like dangerous territory to me.
Yeah, it is. And I'm pretty sure the argument is from the 14th Amendment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But and yeah, sure. As long as you don't define children in the womb as persons, and then maybe you can extrapolate from the 14th Amendment toward a woman's right. But the thing is, you can also extrapolate from the 14th Amendment the opposite, to preserve the life of the infant, because the infant is a person.
Well, you would think that if we're using the Constitution as this kind of base framework, the Constitution itself, the whole point of it was to improve the lives of humans, right? I mean, that's the whole point of the Constitution. We have all of this history. If you're reading the Founding Fathers, you have all this history that's culminating into this, what's worked, what hasn't worked throughout history. Let's try to formulate it based on what we've learned, to come up with this set, this base from which to, found our government.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the fundamental underlying thing, life should be the most important thing. Like, you can't reason from that, I wouldn't think, the right to terminate life. Right.
And there's an irony even in the appealing to the 14th Amendment in this, because the 14th Amendment was made almost in direct contradiction to the Dred Scott case. And the Dred Scott case was all contingent upon defining a slave as property. And then by property, you can use like the Interstate Commerce Clause. And and so what happened in Dred Scott is it reduced a human beings, slaves, to a different category, property. And then it said, therefore, they have different rights. And then the 14th Amendment comes along and goes, no, they're persons. and these are the rights they have because they're persons. Well, now people are trying to use the 14th Amendment, which was there to make sure that everybody was clear about personhood, to say, you know what, actually, fetuses, they're not people. They are, in a sense, property. They're the property of the woman because they're part of her body. So they're actually subverting the entire reasoning of the 14th Amendment and the historical context of it. And they're basically doing what Dred Scott v. Sanford did, which is just utterly ironic, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Let's keep going real quick, because there's another piece of this I wanted to talk about.
Discounts and disregards state interests, and the undue burden standard has all of the problems.
How is your interest anything but a religious view? The issue of when life begins has been hotly debated by philosophers since the beginning of time. It's still debated in religions. So when you say this is the only right that takes away from the state the ability to protect the life, that's a religious view, isn't it? Because it assumes that a fetus is life at when? You're not drawing when do you suggest we begin that life?
I think the philosophical questions Your Honor mentioned, all those reasons that they're hard, they've been debated, they're important. Those are all reasons to return this to the people, because the people should get to debate these hard issues. And this court does not in that kind of a circumstance.
So when does the life of a woman and putting her at risk enter the calculus? Meaning, right now, forcing women who are poor, and that's 75% of the population, and much higher percentage of those women in Mississippi who elect abortions before viability, they are put at a tremendously greater risk of medical complications and ending their life, 14 times greater to give birth to a child full term than it is to have an abortion before viability.
Okay, so, oh God, okay, so much to talk about. First of all, because something is hotly debated doesn't necessarily make it up for grabs, truth-wise.
Yes.
Tupac being alive is hotly debated. That's not up for discussion.
Yeah.
I think, you know, what we're seeing here is an attempt to try to, I think it's desperation. Whenever Roe was decided, we did not really know. I mean, I think it was bad from a constitutional perspective, but also from a scientific perspective, they didn't know. They didn't have what we know today. They didn't have that scientific knowledge about what's going on in conception, right? Which now definitively, if you ask anyone, life begins at conception. Life begins at conception, and it is human. It's not going to be anything else. It's not going to turn into a giraffe. It's not going to turn into, you know, it's human life. Okay. And I have one thing to say before I jump into that. So every law on the books is religious. I just want to say that. Mm-hmm. Every law that we have on our books is a religious law. It's founded in religion. It has some sort of value that it's trying to preserve or to, kind of promote, right? Thou shalt not kill. That is a religious law. It has a value about life, right? Thou shalt not steal is a religious law, right? I could ask you, who says I can't steal? Who says I can't kill someone? Who says I can't do any of this type of thing? And you're going to say, well, just because that's the best way to do it. I'm going to say, no, that's your religion. That's what you believe, not me. I don't believe that. I believe something different. So, every law is religious. That's not a good argument. I just want to throw that out there. Yeah. So Nathan,
Mhm.
viability. What are your thoughts? Is that arbitrary? Is it arbitrary standard?
Well, to me, it's ridiculous. The idea, I think it's a total misnomer anyway.
Yeah.
Because viability is determined by whether or not a baby can survive outside the womb. Is that right?
I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Which of course, no baby can survive outside the womb for more than a couple days,
Yeah, exactly.
right? There's a dependency that the baby still has on the mother
Mhm.
after birth. Um, but to say that something is dependent on something else for life does not mean that thing is not alive.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So vitality, I think is a better word. Uh, Vitality just means, is it alive? And yes, it's alive. And in fact, because it is a living thing that is also dependent on another living thing, it makes it even more imperative that that thing be protected.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, this is why all of us have categories for why things done to children are more despicable than those same things done to adults. Um, and I think one of the reasons for that is because we recognize that um, adults, at least adults, have some sort of ability to like defend themselves, protect themselves, but children are the weakest, most vulnerable, most dependent people in our population. And so we have a natural instinct to go for someone to do X against a child. What a greater despicable thing. And can you find something that's more vulnerable and more dependent um, than a fetus, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, um, to me, and actually, you even see the inconsistency here because some people will take this idea of viability and they actually will extend it to um, the hours after a baby is born. And there are some laws that you know people want to write that says that actually right when a baby's born, you can just leave it on the table um,
Yeah.
and let it die because it's still not really viable, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of Ralph Northam's thing. If you remember that, the whole you know, if the mother decides, we'll deliver the baby, the doctor and the mother will have a discussion about whether to resuscitate the baby. No. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a desperation attempt because I think we keep trying to put these arbitrary benchmarks on it,
Yeah.
on this development of a human life. And it really is just arbitrary. I mean, it's human life from conception all the way until 100 years old at death, and it's all on a spectrum. It's all on at a point of development, right? It all is. And I want to give some encouragement to people who are listening to this, or people who are on the pro-life side or the abolitionist side, or whatever. When you have these hotly debated discussions with pro-choicers or pro-abortionists, one of the best places to start, in my opinion, is to make sure that we all understand that what we're doing here in the discussion, what's going on, is that we are trying to decide when we're trying to put a point of when a human life becomes something more than a human life, something different than. I like to put it this way: throughout history, the group that has tried to put an arbitrary distinction between human and person has never been in the right. Never.
Yeah.
Ever. Right. And so take that as your base framework, right? If you go into the discussion that way, I think the pro-choicer is going to have to fight a lot harder to make sure that they are not putting themselves in the category of history's really terrible groups. You can't, the idea that you're going to make a distinction between person and human has been tried over and over again. Don't do it. Just because it doesn't look like you doesn't mean it's not human. Just because it's smaller than you doesn't mean it's not human, right? Just because it's dependent on its mother more doesn't mean it's not human.
Yeah.
Right? It's in a different environment doesn't mean it's not human. It's human. And that whole thing, we want to make sure our laws, our constitution, and all of that solidify that. That is non-negotiable. Human life is non-negotiable.
Yeah. What are laws for if you can't have laws to protect human life? Right? We have so many laws in the books. And the foundation of pretty much every law, if you take it far enough back, is life, right? So you think about all the laws regarding different kinds of theft. Well, property is next to life in terms of you can't live unless you are able to provide for yourself.
Yeah.
Life is the concept of protecting life is the foundation for judicial law. And so if we can't even be consistent on that, then what are we even doing?
Yeah, exactly. That's like, it seems to be, that should be the first pillar.
Right.
That everything grows out of. Yeah.
So two quick thoughts while I have them in my brain. So one, the rhetoric I noticed from Sotomayor is you are forcing a woman to give birth, and that is dangerous, right? It's 14 times more likely to be harmful to the mother than have an abortion before the fetus is viable. Notice the subtle change in language there. You're forcing a woman to give birth, and that's dangerous for her. Well, if you and Katie decided to just leave your kids at home and just went off for a week, nobody's there, nobody's feeding them, providing for them, the government would come, they'd throw you in jail, and they'd take your children away. And they'd say, this is child endangerment, and you're not doing your responsibility as parents.
Yeah.
And then you can't argue, you're forcing me to provide for my children. That's my money. That's my time. That's my body.
I'm
You're
more likely to undergo, mental health issues.
right. The government's not forcing you to take care of your children. The government is holding you responsible to do what you have freely chosen to submit yourself to, which is providing for another human life. And it's a wonderful, beautiful thing. So this is a totally flipped perspective.
And the risk calculation, in my opinion, should have been made a lot sooner than conception. Obviously there's someone screaming right now, but rape and incest, blah, blah, blah. I get it. Okay, I understand. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
One last thought is on this viability thing is you'd want to ask somebody to tease the logic out. So when do we really define whether or not something is viable? Are we going to count organs? Like, well, when this organ's developed, then X, Y, or Z. Well, the problem is at some point, because of our medical advances, most adults could survive with artificial organ help.
Yeah.
So are we going to say that, oh, well, somebody who needs to be on a breathing machine right now because their lungs aren't working, well, they're no longer human, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not viable anymore.
Yeah.
Somebody who, well, their bladder's been removed and so they need the bags. Like, oh well, they don't have that organ anymore. Like they need,
Yeah.
they're not viable on their own.
Not
It's like, well,
technically human anymore.
yeah, right. Like, yeah, there are plenty of occasions where you get to the point where you're not viable on your own, but yeah, we've got medical advances for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, and we're going to say they're human no matter if they don't have an organ.
Right. And some people try to superimpose this standard of sentience, which I mean, people in a coma, kill them. I mean, they're just get rid of them. But yes, so to everyone listening, what Nathan is doing and what I really like to do in these discussions is kind of it's not pushing the antithesis. It's running kind of a reductio, right? You're reducing the argument, you're pushing it until you expose the absurdity of it. And so Nathan, let's go through some of the tough ones real quick, and we can get quick, like, how do you approach it? Okay. So one of the ones is rape and incest, right? It's not the mother didn't decide to, I mean, it was not her choice. Something terrible happened to her and now she has this baby and it's not fair. Nathan, it's not fair. What do you say?
I would say that the baby didn't have a choice to be conceived, but that doesn't mean you can kill the baby.
Yeah.
Whatever, moral argument you want to make about rape, it's the same with murder.
Yeah. Yep. And then health of the mother. That's another big one. Like, what if the mother's health is at risk? I want to point out though that this, and I didn't know this until we read one of our articles. It's been morphed from life of the mother to health of the mother.
Yep.
That's kind of a little insidious.
It is, and actually, you see this with a law in New York that came out, goodness, I don't know, a year or two ago, where because of the wording was health, it became so broad that it could also constitute mental health.
Yeah, exactly.
And so at that point, yeah, well, any hardship can be understood as dangerous to mental health.
Yeah.
Stress and things.
Yeah. As much as we try to, our culture is really big on the whole mental health thing right now. Make sure you're mentally healthy. Make sure you're in a good place mentally. It's like, I mean, sometimes you get sad. Yeah.
I mean, okay. Here's a great example. A woman has a verbally abusive husband. That is absolutely bad for her mental health. That does not mean that she can shoot him.
Right.
Like, now there are recourses that she can take, legal recourses that she can take, if she needs to get away from it. But she can't kill him just because he's bad for her health, her mental health. And we have so much set up in our country to provide a way for a mother who doesn't think that she can take care of her child, to make sure that child is still taken care of.
Yep.
Yep. So yeah.
Another one is if this happens, if Roe's overturned, there will be back alley abortions. They'll just be unsafe. There'll still be abortions. They'll be unsafe. To which I say, good. I mean, that's kind of like crass, but you don't carve out exceptions to crime. I mean, you don't do that. You don't say, this, bank robber, had a gene that made him, predisposed to like insidious behavior or something like that, or his brain was formed in such a way that he was just more prone to hurting people or just acting terribly. You don't modify the law because there's an exception, and that's another big theme. Just because there are exceptions doesn't mean that the rule is null and void.
Right.
I think we can see this. We see it everywhere, like with the whole like gender debate. Just because there are people who are born kind of ambiguous, very small portion, doesn't mean that the categories of man and woman are not legit categories. They are. They're very legit categories, even though there is small exceptions. You do not modify the rule because of the exceptions.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is no law on the books that totally prevents it from being broken. Like, that's not the point of law. Law is not there to keep you from breaking the law. So, murder has been against the law for forever in this country, and people still murder each other.
Yep. Nathan, if Roe's overturned, would you prosecute miscarriages and, let's just say, ectopic pregnancies?
No, I don't get this one either. Like, there's a big difference between the conscious choice to murder somebody and the
People dying.
involuntarily your body, loses the baby. I mean, this would be like, are you going to? Well, actually, this is kind of relevant a little bit. Would you prosecute somebody if they had a disease and they accidentally spread it to somebody else and then that person died? No. Because you're not. It's the disease that killed the person. It's not you. You just, and you involuntarily spread it.
Right. And people might push back and say, well, ectopic pregnancy is technically an abortion because the fetus or the egg, the fertilized egg, will develop, but because of where it is, because of where it's attached, it will also kill the mother. To which I would say, yes, there are terrible situations like that where this has to happen. Like you have to get rid of that, or the baby's going to die, or the mother and the baby are going to die. That doesn't change the fact that abortions, the vast majority of abortions, are elective. They're just because, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. And then obviously everyone wants to put their own standard on when personhood begins, to which I would say you're putting yourself in a historically in a camp that you don't want to be in.
Right. Well, and there's a classic line, I can't remember who said it, but when in doubt, don't risk the life of somebody. Right? So, well, we don't know when that person becomes a human being. Well, then you err on the side of making sure you don't accidentally, or making sure you don't kill somebody who actually ends up being a human being.
Right.
You don't err on the side of, well, let's just kill him.
Hang on one second. Sorry. Did you hear that?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
No.
Well, it was recorded. I had the little clip in the track that was like the end of the episode, and it started.
Oh.
But anyways, okay, sorry. Go back like 5 seconds.
Yeah. So you got, if you don't know when life begins, you err on the side of not killing what could be a human life.
Yep.
You don't err on the side of letting people do whatever they want to it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So those are just some like quick, big arguments that people make. Is there any ones that you think I missed? I think those are kind of the big ones.
Yeah, I mean, the other one, I guess, is just defining a fetus as part of a woman's body is the other big one. So a woman can do what she wants with her own body. So some people say, if she has cancer, she gets to remove the cancer. She has a fetus, she gets to remove the fetus.
You're gonna make that equate? Okay.
Yeah, and that's how some people will argue that it's a part of a woman's body.
You know what I think is really funny? Or I don't think it's funny. I think it's very sad. When pro-choice politicians say it should be up to the woman and her doctor to make this tough choice.
Mm.
Why is it a tough choice? Like what? Like is it? I mean, if it's as inane as removing a wart, just remove the wart. But I think it just exposes that we know what's going on here. We know it.
Yeah, there was a survey that went out. I don't remember. I think it may have been Pew Research or Barna, but they did it differently than most of these sort of surveys. They actually like sat and had a conversation with people about abortion, and it came back that 100% of them who were pro-abortion also said that abortion is not a desirable good. It's a sad fact of life that some people need to do, but it's not a desirable good.
Yeah.
Now, that tells me two things simultaneously. One, you deep down then know that it's wrong, right? If you're saying it's not a desirable good, it's a tough choice, it's really hard, like you said, if it was just removing a wart, it wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But it also is it's self-contradictory, because I mean, one of the things that Aristotle argues very persuasively is you never make a certain choice unless you think it is a desirable good.
Mhm.
Nobody consciously chooses something that they actually think is bad.
Mhm.
Even when you do something that you know is against the law, or you do something that you know is sinful, the reason why you're doing it is because you think that there is some sort of good attached to that
Yeah.
you want. And so to say, well, it's not a desirable good, but I'm going to do it anyway, means that actually there is some greater good that you think will be accomplished
Yeah.
by killing that fetus.
Isn't that also kind of was it Calvin's bondage of the will? Was it Calvin?
Luther.
Oh, Luther. Okay, yeah. Yeah, you everything, you always act on what you want to do.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah. So why are we talking about this on a podcast about economics and business and that sort of thing? Well, I think and I don't want to go too long, but I do want to kind of dig into the deeper fundamental philosophies going on. And Nathan, you and I have discussed this in the past, but there's when we have our talks about like libertarianism versus conservatism versus progressivism, all of that, there's this idea of we don't have a sense of duty in society anymore, or a sense of duty or a sense of like responsibility. Right. One of my things coming out of, or maybe kind of coming away from, a more libertarian kind of understanding of society and economics and all that, is this idea that we don't want to cultivate this sense of what's in it for me, how is this benefiting me, my rights, my individual person. It's all about individual freedoms and stuff like that. Those are good things in and of themselves. They're good things, but I think having that as your kind of posture in society will lead to or will cultivate a sense of self, right? A priority of self, like what's in it for me, how am I going to protect me, what that sort of thing. Do you think that's what's going on here with the abortion thing? That it's a culmination of a culture that has preached for a long time, me. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough because historically, like, abortion's been going on for thousands of years. I mean, they had abortions in the Roman Empire. Of course, they were much more primitive and dangerous. But people, I mean, people have always been motivated by greed and motivated by comfort and motivated by um, easiness.
Yeah.
And having children is hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so kind of in every age, you see people trying to figure out ways to not have to take care of their children. And of course, in the ancient world, you also had a lot of times that people would just leave their babies out to die of exposure. And so we've figured out very sophisticated ways to kill them before they're born.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could be exacerbated by this form of liberalism for sure, that encourages people to only think about their rights and their life, their liberty, their pursuit of happiness,
Yeah.
and not anybody else's. I think that's probably true. It has been exacerbated, but this abortion is one of the most historically consistent examples of the fallen human condition.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see, and I wanted to make this connection just to bring it into the economics discussion, because I think a lot of this can be seen in other areas as well, like the student loan crisis, right? This sense that we're going to shirk off our responsibilities. We'll take on all the risk, but don't, take on, we want to be absolved of any of the responsibility or the, the back end work that needs to be done. Yeah, student loans is a big one, is a huge one. Healthcare. I wrote in my notes that there's lots of caveats here because our healthcare situation is very muddied right now. But you have to be responsible to take care of your body. I mean, you have to be responsible to eat right, exercise. That's a responsibility that you have for not only yourself, but also for others, right? Family. And if you're going to live in a society that provides universal health care, your health is everyone else's responsibility, or is everyone else's interest as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think a great example of this is that wherever you fall on, say, legalized marijuana, almost everybody agrees that there should be laws against other drugs, hard drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you think about the opioid epidemic, you think about meth and cocaine. Why, just making a libertarian sort of argument, why should the government be concerned about keeping people from these sort of drugs? And the reason is because most of us, not everybody, but most of us recognize that you actually do have some sort of responsibility to society, the people around you, and these drugs destroy your life, and because they destroy your life, they affect everybody else. So you go to communities that have just been gutted by drug abuse. They're not doing well. Those communities are not doing well, and the children growing up in those communities are not doing well. The people who have never done drugs in their life are still not doing well because of the decisions of other people to just give themselves over to these drugs. And so we all recognize that there has to be a line where the government gets involved to make sure that people take care of themselves for the sake of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
the flip side of that,
right, you can take that too far, right? Is the government going to start mandating whether or not you can eat potato chips because that increases your risk of heart disease, right?
Or what was Giuliani banned certain amounts of sodas from being sold in New York City?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's the classic spectrum of individual liberty and the common good, right? And we recognize that it's actually, for the sake of the common good, you need a certain level of individual liberty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then also for the sake of the common good, there has to be some sort of point where individual liberty stops.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
It's obvious in some cases, it's not obvious in others.
Yeah. And even you were kind of framing it in the from the common good perspective. Because we want the common good, we need a sense of individual liberty. I would also say, because we want individual liberty, there needs to be a framework, laws, rules set for the common good. Like there needs to be that sort of like structure in order for independence and liberty to make any sense, like for it to actually work. Yeah. The other one I had on here was what the wealth redistribution discussion, which is if you know, there's lots of people, obviously there's lots of caveats here as well, but the main thing is I don't want to work, but I want the benefits of the work, right? I've been watching this fascinating talk between Jordan Peterson, and I think he's at, I don't remember what university he's at. He's like an economics professor, but they're talking about the Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle, where 80% of the production or results come from 20% of the population. And you see that everywhere. You see it. It's not just economics. It's in nature. It just, for some reason, you see it everywhere. And it's so mysterious. They don't know why. It just like, yeah, it's very fascinating. But the idea is that there's going to be wealth inequality, right? But that doesn't mean that we need to like redistribute all of this wealth. In a base framework, we need the understanding that if you work, you know, you will produce. Work brings production, brings benefits, brings welfare, that sort of thing. Yeah, and you're responsible for it.
Right. And that's another example of where people go to exceptions. And of course, there are exceptions.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But that doesn't mean that the principle is not sound.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. There are exceptions, but that does not nullify the rule. My other note in here says a deficiency of duty is why we veered away from libertarianism. So yeah, the main thing I have in here is we need a sense of duty and responsibility. We need self-government, and we need an understanding of man's sinful nature. Yeah, that's what I got for this episode. Yeah, how do we connect the two? No, there's a sense in which we have to understand that our actions produce results, and we are responsible for those results. We need to be held accountable for those results. In the abortion discussion, it's up to us. It's our responsibility. It's our duty to care for the lives of babies for others. And having an entrenched sense of self, what's in it for me, what my rights, don't tread on me, that sort of thing. I think there's a case to be made that you can reason from that this whole abortion, fiasco.
Yeah. Well, one of the major philosophers of free market capitalism is Ludwig von Mises.
Mm-hmm.
And his, main economic book was called Human Action. And his argument is that at the very basis of economics is anthropology. It's what humans do and what humans are. And so this sort of debate about a fetus being a human being and protecting the rights of the unborn is very much an economic question. Mm-hmm. It's very much a market question, which is what you wrote about in your article, which I think you've put in the show notes, that abortion is anti-capitalism.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. People, you need to go read that if you haven't read it. Yeah. the basic thing was, your body, your time is your first capital, right? And so at conception, when you are a human life, it's human and it's life, right? That, you're going to be on a spectrum for your whole life of growth and dependence and all of that. But at conception, you have capital, you have resources that God has given you to act, to do, to produce, all of those things. And so abortion is anti-capitalism. So, all right. Love it. Anything else, Nathan? Last words? I always say any last words like you're going to walk off the plank.
This is my last act before death.
All right, everyone. Go like and subscribe to the podcast. Share this episode. By the time I put this out, I don't know if the full draft of Alito's opinion will be released officially. But yeah, go share it. Let people listen to it. I think the discussion needs to be had. It'll be fruitful. People might get upset, but at least they'll understand where we're coming from. Nathan, as a last little bit, there's been studies that show that generally speaking, conservatives, by and large, understand the arguments of progressives. But on the flip side, progressives don't usually understand the arguments. They don't know the arguments of conservatives.
Interesting.
Their side. I'll pull up that study and maybe I'll share it. But yeah, interesting. It's probably because conservatives are bombarded by it, in society just all the time anyway.
Yes, that's true. Well, it's like that NPR guy. I think he used to be the CEO of NPR or whatever. And then he went around the country meeting and talking to conservatives. And then I think he wrote a book called The Liberal Bubble or something like that. And basically he realized that he was in such a bubble, he didn't actually even know what conservatives were like or what they believed. So he just wrote about how it's really easy as a progressive to just be in this bubble, but it's kind of impossible to be in a conservative bubble. I mean, you can be in a conservative bubble in one sense, in terms of your community, but if you have access to the internet or television or the news or anything else, you're bombarded with it.
Exactly. But also you kind of see it in Congress as well, like where, the Democrats usually are lockstep with one another, but then conservatives, you have lots of different disagreements and all that kind of stuff. Word of advice for everyone listening to this: if you're gonna argue with someone, or if you're gonna have a meaningful discussion with someone, make sure you can you understand their argument and that you can restate their argument to them before you have the discussion. I think that'll be really helpful. All right. And also Good Fight Outfitters, go check it out. New designs, really cool stuff going on there. So yeah. All right. Until next time, love God, love neighbor, build something. Talk to you later.
This has been a Manifold Ministries podcast. For more content, visit us at manifoldministries.com.